Portugal has just gone to the polls for the second round of the presidential election. And that alone is pretty unusual, as this is only the second time since the 1974 Carnation Revolution that Portugal has needed a runoff. The last time was all the way in 1986. But do these elections even matter? Well, the Portuguese presidency is mostly ceremonial, but it's not powerless. The president can veto laws, dissolve the parliament in political crisis, and plays a very important stabilizing role in the system. And we've seen those powers used very recently. For example, President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa repeatedly vetoed euthanasia legislation passed by the parliament, forcing lawmakers to rewrite the law multiple times before it could finally enter into force. And after the Antonio Costa scandal, when the prime minister resigned over a corruption scandal involving the people around him, Marcelo went even further, dissolving the entire parliament altogether and calling snap elections. And it's worth stressing, he didn't have to do that. Marcelo could have simply appointed another prime minister and allowed the legislature to continue. But instead, he sent the country back to the polls. And this decision shows that in moments of crisis, the Portuguese president can actively shape how political crises end. So, on to the presidential election. 3 weeks ago, Portugal held its first round of its presidential election with 5 main contenders. First place went to António José Seguro, backed by the Socialist Party, who won 31.1% of the vote, outperforming most polls. He ran as a moderate centrist socialist, benefiting from the absence of a strong left-wing alternative and successfully consolidating the center-left vote behind him. In second place came André Ventura, leader of the far-right Chega. And with 23.5%, he had an incredible result that once again confirms Chega as a major force in Portuguese politics. Third place was taken by João Coutrinho de Figueiredo from the Liberal Initiative, who also delivered a very strong performance. They almost tripled their previous national results and pulled a lot of support from the traditional center-right. And in fourth place came Henrique Gouveia e Melo, running as an independent, who attracted a sizable share of center-right and protest voters. And then, in fifth place, came Luís Marques Mendes, the PSD-backed candidate with just 11% of the vote. That's a historically poor result for the government-endorsed candidate. Just look at the Portuguese parliament. The PSD has the most seats, yet in the presidential election, its endorsed candidate finished behind every major contender. So, what happens next? Because no candidate crossed the 50% threshold, the top 2 advanced to a second round, the runoff, sending Portuguese voters back to the polls once again. And that happened this Sunday, where the socialist António José Seguro faced off against the far-right candidate André Ventura. And António José Seguro won by a landslide. He secured more than 65% of the vote, leaving no doubt about the outcome. And that makes him the new president of Portugal. Congratulations, Antonio. So, what does it actually mean for Portugal, though? In one word, it means stability. António José Seguro has been very clear about the role he wants to play. He says he is not there to act as an opponent to the PSD-led government, which currently governs as a minority, but to serve the people, the country as a whole. And that kind of matters, because this outcome would have looked very different if André Ventura had won. A Ventura presidency would almost certainly have turned the presidency into a political weapon, a platform to boost Chega's power, escalate confrontation with the government, and inject far more uncertainty into Portuguese politics. And he could do this through the aggressive use of the presidential veto, and potentially even a dissolution of the parliament. But while the presidency now looks settled, this election also exposes a deeper problem, especially for the PSD. The party suffered a crushing defeat in the first round, despite leading the current government. And that raises a bigger question. Who is actually Portugal's political frontrunner right now? And the answer is, no one really knows. The center-right looks fragmented. The far-right has a solid base, but seems to have a clear ceiling. And while the socialists won the presidency, they performed poorly in the last parliamentary election. And that uncertainty is likely to define Portuguese politics long after this election is over. As for the European Union, which is what we of course care about, this election doesn't really change a lot. The Portuguese president does not sit within the European Council. That's the Prime Minister instead, Luís Montenegro, meaning that day-to-day EU decision-making remains largely the same. That said though, this result might matter to socialists across Europe, as Seguro's victory might be seen as a symbolic win and boost confidence at a time when centre-left parties have been losing ground in several EU countries over the last couple of years. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support us further, please sign up to Patreon. And thank you so much to our presidents, Christian and Peter Clement, Daniel Dev Eupedia Giuseppe, HVD J Kiki Luxon, Maciej Mikael Rashid, Schaukje Jan Stefan Unite Europe, Westervang, and Ave Europa. See you in the next video.